To the regular Friday program of the City Club of Portland. I'm Mary Kramer, the president of the club. We have to start our program today with a few announcements. Next week, on Friday, October 12th, we're pleased to have Mayred Corrigan McGuire, one of two women to receive the Nobel Peace Prize in 1977. She'll speak on her work to advance peace and justice in Northern Ireland. McGuire became inspired to work for peace when 3 of her family members were killed at the height of the country's violence in 1976. She's one of the founders of the Community of Peace People of Northern Ireland, a reconciliation group based in Belfast which works to unite Catholics and Protestants and end the deep division that exists within that country. This program is being co-sponsored with the Oregon Catholic Conference. We will be meeting at U.S. Bank Corp Tower, 41st floor. 2 weeks from today, on Friday, October 19th, Tom Troop, chair of the Deschutes County Commission and a member of the Land Conservation and Development Commission, will speak on managing the growing pains, Oregon's land use system, which are facing us now throughout the state. He'll also talk about the impact of growth on Deschutes County, because at this particular point in time, Deschutes County is the fastest growing county in Oregon. We will meet again at U.S. Bank Corp Tower, 41st floor. City Club is launching a leadership training program. It's a course especially designed for City Club members. It will meet 1 full day and then 4 half days from October the 25th through December 13th. The course is based on Stephen Covey's book, which is called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It is a principle-centered approach to leadership, and we're delighted to have this opportunity to offer it. We have offered it first to our standing committees and administrative committee members. However, if other people are interested, please call Nancy Hedin, Executive Director of the club, at the club office. This week in your bulletin, we printed the members of the Arts and Culture and Business and Labor Standing Committees. We will be printing the names of the other committee members in coming bulletins, but this week I got a call from one of the members of the Business and Labor Committee who said how wonderful it was to be on this committee and what an exciting committee it was going to be this year. She said the energy, enthusiasm, and knowledge in the room were really astounding. It's a wonderful opportunity for City Club members to get involved with the club by joining a standing committee. We will probably be asking for more volunteers around January but it is a committee member to tell me how well it was going. My congratulations to those committees. Now for our program. Today we have Barbara Roberts, Democratic candidate for governor of Oregon, in a single chair debate. As was announced in the bulletin, Attorney General Dave Frohnmayer, the Republican candidate, was invited to participate in the program. However, he declined. Under City Club policy, the candidate who does accept is invited to appear unopposed. The format for today is that candidate Roberts will give a 10-minute opening statement. Following that, 2 City Club panelists will ask a series of questions of her. These questions were prepared by the club's program committee. On the panel today are Pauline Anderson, Multnomah County Commissioner, and Roger Bachman, Senior Account Supervisor with Graphic Media Incorporated. Both are members of the club's program committee. I'd also as our timekeeper today. Club panelists complete their questions. City Club members have an opportunity to ask questions. There is a microphone in the center of the room. We'll ask you to move to the mic and state your question in 30 seconds. Barbara will have 1 minute to respond. At 1:10 promptly, we will end the audience questions and proceed to the Secretary of State's closing remarks. Please join me in welcoming Secretary of State Barbara Roberts, Pauline Anderson, and Roger Bachman to our program today.
Well, my campaign for governor has come a long way since last February. I started with 16-hour notice, virtually nothing in my campaign account, and an opponent who'd been in harness for over 6 months. It didn't look like much of a horse race. Today, 4.5 weeks left until the election day, I've laid out my program on almost every major Oregon issue. I've taken a stand on the easy stuff and the tough stuff. Yesterday's Oregonian poll says I'm within 1 point of Dave Frohnmayer. All of that hard work has paid off, and if I'm not careful, I'm going to lose my underdog status. 7 months is a short time for voters to get to know a candidate for Oregon's highest office. You have a right to learn whether your candidate has the experience, the honesty, the guts, and the ideas to lead and to manage Oregon state government through some uncharted waters during this time of growth and change in Oregon. Well, I have made a commitment to myself. I pledge that no matter what happens in this campaign, no matter how negative my opponent gets, I will work to elevate the debate about issues that matter to Oregonians. That way, if I win, I will be better prepared to take the reins of state government. I will have spelled out my plans, and the people will know what they're getting. If I lose, I still want to leave something lasting, an honest, straightforward discussion with Oregonians about what we expect from state government as we prepare for the 21st century. My attitude about government was shaped 20 years ago in the heat of a very personal struggle. I got involved in government fighting for the educational rights of my handicapped son. As a single mom and the sole support of 2 sons, I went to the state capitol to lobby the legislature for my son and other disabled children. And I won. That was 20 years ago. My record since then is one that I'm very proud of. I'm the only candidate in this race with any real experience in business, 15 years in small business. I'm the only one of the 4 candidates with local government experience as a local school board member, and a community college board member, and a county commissioner. I learned how to make public decisions nose to nose with my neighbors, and that's a very good experience. I'm the only candidate in this race who has given thousands of hours as a community volunteer over the last 25 years. And I've managed, and managed well, the second highest office in this state government for almost 6 years, over 250 employees and a $25 million budget. I am fully prepared to build the partnerships with government, business, labor, and citizens, the partnerships with the fresh solutions, and the solutions that will work. We will welcome more new residents into this state, both in migration and immigration, in the next 10 years than we did in the more than 2-decade heyday of the Oregon Trail. I want to lead an Oregon which manages growth aggressively, building light rail, making sure our land use laws don't get watered down under the pressure of growth, making affordable housing available, and protecting Oregon's remarkable natural beauty. In this campaign and throughout my entire career, I've been committed to make government work for people. I want my first 4 years as governor to be made on that commitment and judged on that commitment. And today I want to talk about 3 of the major commitments I have for Oregon. I begin with education, because the classroom is where our future is shaped. Will we become an economic backwater, or will we make sure our kids are prepared and they're ready to compete and to lead in a global and technological marketplace? Well, as a 10-year school board member, let me tell you something. Was I able to devote all of my time and energy to creating education for kids? No. I sat in endless meetings and worked in campaigns trying to pass school levies so we could keep our doors open. What a waste of time and what a waste of resources. Well, that is not good enough for Oregon. I propose dramatic new ways of funding schools in Oregon. I am going to eliminate under my plan 100% of school property taxes. I want to replace that property tax with a constitutionally protected, tamper-proof Oregon sales tax. There is no link between the property wealth of a district and the needs to educate our children. Property taxes should go for local services which protect property, police and fire and sewers and roads. The link is clear there. My plan will eliminate about 64% of homeowners' property tax burden, and it would end once and for all the property tax wars in our communities. Then I'll put school board leaders and teachers and parents together, working to create quality local educational programs to meet the needs of a 21st century workplace and world. That's what local control of schools and accountability on the part of education should mean. That's what I think Oregonians want. That's what my plan provides. No other plan in this race meets that test. And don't let anyone tell you that my plan sets aside or usurps local control of schools. In fact, if the legislature should try to take that away, I would veto such a bill. Secondly, I am committed to quality, affordable health care for every Oregonian. Right now, 1 in 6 Oregonians, 400,000 Oregonians, have no health insurance at all. Most of them are from working families, and I believe that's unacceptable. When Oregonians go without adequate health care, we all pay. Our insurance rates go up, and we pay not only our own health care, but for those who can't pay. I am committed to work with the legislature to carry out their commitment and mine to health care coverage for every single Oregonian. No other candidate will make that commitment. It won't be easy, but it's my priority. And I think it's Oregon's priority for the future, and I put together a specific plan to help achieve it. My plan includes new cost-saving initiatives, emphasizing prevention, plus programs to help small business insure their employees, and added work on health care provisions for senior citizens. Finally, I want to say something about Oregon's wave of crime. I know how a lot of Oregonians feel. I've been burglarized 3 times in less than 2 years. As Oregonians, are we going to continue business as usual, or take a tough, hard-headed approach, a new approach to those who violate our homes and businesses, destroy our peace of mind, and ruin the lives of our kids? My opponent points out that my background isn't in law enforcement, and he's absolutely right. But you don't have to be Dick Tracy to figure out that the old ways of the last 10 years aren't working, and someone has to do something. I have laid out a specific plan on crime. It begins with enough new prison beds to meet the need that we already have. It includes using prison time productively, in gaining basic work skills, and in mandatory treatment of drug and alcohol programs for prisoners. And my plan goes way back to the communities where criminals come from and where they will return. We need more intensive supervision of parolees so they don't lapse and come back into the prison system. And we need fresh, new efforts in prevention based in communities and neighborhoods where people live. And so far, I'm the only candidate in this race to lay out a specific plan to combat crime. I told Oregonians exactly how much it was going to cost, and I told them that those dollars are going to compete with other things that we'd like to do. But that is reality, and I can't tell it any other way. That's a test I put before myself as a candidate. That's a test you as Oregonians can measure me by. And that is the test I will meet as your governor.
Barbara, the media has portrayed you and your opponent as having similar positions in many areas. Are you really more similar than different? And how do you and your opponent differ on some issues then?
Well, I think we're more apart than alike, and this campaign is showing that. Clearly, I'm the only one with experience in small business, with the experience in local government, with a community volunteer experience. And I think the major difference between us exists in the fact that through my public career and through this campaign, I have been willing to talk about the tough issues. I've been willing to tell you my stands, I've been willing to give you my proposals, and I've been willing to put a price tag on those proposals. I think more than anything else, that is the difference between us. Don't expect a decisive governor if you don't see a decisive candidate. And that is the difference between Dave Frohnmayer and Barbara Roberts.
The second question comes from panelist Roger Bachman. Roger?
Barbara, water is my thing, and it's clear that we're outgrowing our water resources in the state. How would you change the way we're managing our water resources?
Well, first of all, I think we have to manage water for both quality and quantity, and I don't think we can separate those two issues. The problem we have in the state, and you notice it particularly in Eastern Oregon where I was yesterday, is that there is more and more competition, more people and more uses competing for those water, and there is more and more ways in which we are damaging that water by what we do industrially and agriculturally and in other ways. We have to give a very heavy priority to agriculture that produces food. The food you eat, the food on your table today, that has to be a high priority. But there must also be water content and use for our recreational and our fish use as two other examples. That means we have to look at how we're using water, how we're wasting water, how we can conserve water, and how we keep that water in very high quality. And that means that we examine closely issues like the new leach mining proposal that is being looked at now for Oregon. That gives us both a way to look at quantity and quality, critical to Oregon's future use of water.
Pauline? If the property tax limitation measure passes, measure 5, and if a sales tax measure fails, what next?
What an easy question. Well, first of all, I'm not willing to admit either of those things. I don't believe that in the end, Oregonians are going to pass Measure 5. First of all, because they're beginning to understand how damaging it is. And secondly, because they're seeing a gubernatorial candidate who is giving them a plan that not only gives you more property tax relief than Measure 5, but it gives it to you faster, and it still gives us a responsible way to fund schools. I am committed, as the next governor of this state, to give my first and priority energy to making sure that a proposal that gets rid of the property tax burden that is put there by schools moves those schools onto a sales tax, and I believe, like Tom McCall campaigned for his measure, that if I am in every community in this state, and I tell Oregonians what this measure does, how it works, and answer their questions honestly and directly, and I make it my priority, I believe Oregonians are ready for this measure, and they're ready for a governor who brings this measure to them, particularly in the beginning of a gubernatorial term when they still like you a lot.
Your crime program you just referred to, major prison expansion and other things, is going to cost a lot of money. And the state economist says we can't afford it even if we take away the spending limitation. Where would you get the money for this?
Well, if anyone examines the current governor's budget, they would find that he has given a very, very high priority to crime and prison beds and supervision of parolees. His program costs about, in fact, a little more than the one that I have proposed, and he has put it into a balanced budget. He can do that, I can do that, and I think the important thing is that we cannot fight this problem of crime if we're not willing to invest. I know what it costs. I know what it will take from other programs while we do it, but we can do it, and I have it in my budget as the governor has it in his current balanced budget.
Margaret, the governor's task force on corrections planning in its July report recommends that the next governor and legislature restore the balance by emphasizing community sanctions rather than prison sanctions. Do you agree that the recent rapid expansion of prison space has put our system out of balance, and how would you correct this imbalance?
Clearly what is happening now in Oregon is we are in a box created by years of no one moving to get the beds we needed as our population increased. So we're trying to do all at once what we should have done over a very gradual period of time. So we do have to build more of the beds. But we cannot stop there. We must do the prevention and the community services. And what we have seen where that occurs, with my 2.5 years in juvenile services work as the chair of the Multnomah County Juvenile Services Commission, we found that prevention indeed works. In community policing, we found that prevention works. In dealing even with parolees and probationers, when we bring them into the community and keep them out in their alcohol and drug programs and keep them working, we know that works as well. Prevention is absolutely critical to how we deal with crime and how we live with crime over the next number of decades. What we're doing now is making up for neglect over a long period of time, including the Attorney General, who did not move in 10 years for new prison beds for Oregon and put us in part of the box that we find ourselves in today.
Barbara, why do you suppose Dave Frohnmayer ducked to the opportunity to debate you?
I can't tell you why Dave Frohnmayer decided not to debate before the City Club. We worked very hard and originally proposed 10 debates, one of them here, including the one at the coast and one in Salem and other places we wish to debate, as well as the schedule you now see. And he chose not to do that. If we did not give in to those demands, none of the debates took place. So I am sorry that he's not here. I wish that he were here. It was fun to see him last night. I would have loved to have seen him today.
Portland State University is the only public institution of higher education in the Portland metropolitan area. How do you propose to take our university out of the neglected and abused stepchild status it has suffered for lo these many years and make it a first-class urban university?
Well, the whole area of higher education is one which I believe we've neglected in Oregon. I think it's reflected in our libraries, it's reflected in our higher education salaries, it's reflected in our research programs that have been underfunded. Portland State certainly falls at the top of that area of neglect. I am absolutely committed that we can have a high-class, first-class, quality institution in the largest metropolitan area in Oregon. We must make that happen. Part of it, I believe, will actually happen because you have an outstanding new president in charge of that institution. And you have a governor who is committed to that institution as well as other higher ed institutions in this state. I will not let Portland State University become a stepchild in the educational process for Oregon. We need every quality institution, and we need one here, particularly in the metropolitan area where we are having the greatest economic changes and the largest population growth.
There are important plans underway for West Side light rail in the metro area, and an important issue on the ballot which the voters may turn down because it involves property taxes. If it is turned down, what would you as governor do to help provide the matching funds that would be necessary to get that light rail project going?
I begin to feel like Pollyanna today. I don't think they're going to turn it down. I think that they know that to get a 25% match from local property taxes and a 75% match from the federal government, we won't get this chance again. I have it endorsed and am completely committed to that proposal, and we must build it. I happen to believe it ought to go past Hillsborough and all the way to Forest Grove before we're finished. I am just as committed that when we get this one passed, that we move immediately to passing the one for Clackamas County. I cast my vote in 1978 for light rail in this area. It was the best vote I ever cast as county commissioner. I knew it then, and I know it clearly now. So my commitment as governor will be to light rail. We will make it happen, but I'm hoping that the voters in this area, as they vote on this proposal, will understand they will never again get this much federal help in building that light rail. We've got to build it because we can't become not only a Los Angeles, but a Seattle. Oregon must do better than that.
All right, this is not a Pollyanna question. The fate of Oregon's timber industry is foremost in voters' minds this fall. You've made your concern about timber of the state's timber workers well known. How would you balance job retention versus environmental protection?
Well, that is what I have tried to do during this race, is to talk about that balance. And anybody who's telling you there's another answer doesn't understand Oregon, Oregonians, the timber industry, or our environment. I believe that by making use of every tree we cut in Oregon, meaning that we get every job out of every tree we cut, and we will cut more second growth timber in the future than we have cut old growth timber in the past, we can do the secondary wood products, we can keep our logs in Oregon, and we can continue to be sure that a large portion of those timber jobs are there. But we must also not turn our back on the fact that whether this crisis occurred this year or next year or 4 years from now, it was coming. We've been closing mills for over 10 years in Oregon, and that we have a resource that is more than just a tree plantation in Oregon. We must make sure that a portion of what we have is preserved. We must make certain that we protect the environment that we have been given so that we don't cut every old growth tree in Oregon and look back 5 years from now and say, if only in 1990 and in 1991 we had bitten the bullet, done it right, and stood for a balanced Oregon future.
Prospect of drilling for oil off Oregon's coast has been raised, and in light of our increasing energy needs nationally and regionally, how would you handle such proposals?
I had occasion last week to be at the beach, driving, as candidates do a lot, and watch the sunset on the Oregon coast. And I have to tell you, I don't want to see oil derricks silhouetted against my sunset at the Oregon beach. Offshore drilling for oil. We do not have any indication that there is nearly enough to make it worth the loss. I'm opposed to offshore mining. That is not what our coast and our beaches were meant to do in Oregon. And we can't let current hysteria over the Middle East crisis and oil change our strong commitment to Oregon's beaches and the protection of our offshore environment. I am absolutely committed to not let it happen when I am governor.
There has been recent criticism of the banking community in Portland for refusing to make loans in certain areas of the city. What would you do to encourage lenders to become partners in affordable housing in low-income areas?
First of all, there is no question we have a very serious affordable housing problem. It is really a crisis. And I have a proposal to deal with that I put out 3 months ago that literally goes down the steps of making it happen. I also have, sort of unusual for a Democrat, a good working relationship with the banking community. And I will begin with them to make certain that any kind of move to take away the opportunity of qualified people ready to buy a home in North or Northeast Portland is not handled any differently than it would be in Southwest or Northwest Portland. And we must be sure, first of all, that that happens. Secondly, we cannot let people take advantage of the current crisis and abuse the people who are attempting to buy homes in those lower income communities. We must stop what you saw happen with the bilk or fraud that occurred in Northeast Portland, and we must make sure that the Attorney General and other law enforcement officers are making sure that that fraud and abuse of potential homeowners stops in Oregon today.
Polls show that there's strong support for the ballot measure that requires parental notification before an abortion is performed. And we know your position on the choice issue, but are there any circumstances under which you would support limitations on a minor's right to abortion?
I'll try to say this clearly one more time. I am pro-choice. I believe in a female's right to choose. I make no exception to that, and it includes both of the ballot measures on the 1990 ballot in Oregon.
Who they are and what they're seeking to do. Do you remember the last time that group of individuals, which I presume were all white males, have endorsed a woman running for governor?
It is my recollection, Mr. Davis, that at no time has that group of professional law enforcement officers ever endorsed a woman for governor. And I think we need to understand a little bit about that. Obviously, Dave Frohnmayer, Attorney General, he has a working relationship with the people who are involved. They are his friends, and they have endorsed him. There are 72 of them, and they have given him their endorsement. I have a very strong record on crime in the legislature, in my community. I'm the only person with a proposal on crime to make sure we do something about it in the next 4 years. So there is nothing in my record that reflects any reason they should not feel comfortable with me, except possibly the one you just brought forward.
Mary McCarthy, member. Last January, you were invited to a physicians meeting to tell the story of your disabled son, and I happened to attend that meeting. And I heard you tell the story about how you helped your severely handicapped son get the help that he needed to become self-sufficient as an adult. If you could tell all the mothers and fathers out in the audience how you got the guts to do all that, I believe that you'd have all the votes of those people. What's your advice to struggling parents? And is your success with your son a key reason why you're able to take stands on issues?
I sometimes tell people that leadership is having the self-confidence to believe you can make a difference, having the passion to believe it matters, and having the courage to move forward and do it. That's what I did with my son. I could not accept the fact that my child didn't have the right to a public education, and I fought for that right. That's what I've been doing all of my life. That's why I have the accomplishments I do, because I've never been afraid to stand up and fight for what I believed was right. I don't believe that any child is a throwaway in this culture, and that included my son. Today, my son, who would have been institutionalized for the rest of his life, works at Mount Hood Community College. He has his own apartment. He pays taxes. He's a volunteer at Cape Radio every Saturday. That's what happens when you don't believe a child is a throwaway. And that's what happens when you take in your hands their life and their future. I did that. I'll do it again, not only as a citizen and a mother, but as governor of the state.
Problems in Oregon are primarily due to our constitutional restriction, which dictates that all monies collected from auto-related taxes should be spent on highways only. As governor, would you work actively to change that?
It comes as a surprise that your question relates to that subject matter, right? Very, very strong supporter of mass transportation, of light rail, and of community bus service. And I think we have to work to make that happen. I am ready to take this issue back and talk to Oregonians about it again, saying how do we make that happen if we continue to spend all of our money in building new freeways. We need roads, and believe me, from east to west, we need them more than we need them anyplace else. As a person who drives often eastern and central Oregon, I'll tell you we need them. And I support Access Oregon in making those roads available to move product and produce. But as our population increases, we must find a way to move our people in quantity. And that means that we must have mass transit, both light rail and community bus service.
Paul Parker, City Club member. In the past 4 years, certain members of our congressional delegation have worked very closely with the current governor on trying to resolve the timber industry crisis. If you were elected, would you prefer or find it easier to work with Harry Lonsdale or Mark Hackney?
One of the things I showed when I was majority leader of the House is that I can work across party lines for what is good for Oregon.
City Club member. Barbara, this question is for you and for Dave. Perhaps you'd care to answer it first. As Governor, Barbara, as part of your legislative program, would you support legislative restrictions on the possession of assault rifles?
Let me say very clearly that I am very pleased with the beginning that was made in the last session on the 15-day waiting period, an important step for Oregon. I believe in the right to bear arms for hunting, for law enforcement, for collectors, and for self-defense. But I don't understand why any Oregonian needs to own a weapon that is basically a weapon of war, an assault weapon. And I think we need to examine whether that makes any sense in terms of the safety of our communities, our children, in Oregon, and I think we need to take a very close look at that issue now.
City Club member. We've seen a growing number of hate crimes in the state of Oregon, and I was wondering, if elected governor, what would you do to encourage and celebrate diversity in Oregon?
I hope that my record in Oregon is a beginning to that answer. The work that I have done to bring together that diversity in a positive way, the affirmative action record I have in my own agency, my willingness to be there and outspoken on the issue of those who speak with hatred about those who are different. I believe we all march to a different drummer, and I believe we don't have to march with the same colors flying. We've got to be willing in this culture, and I am willing today and every day to step forward and say that racial violence, ethnic hatred, and those who divide us are not an acceptable way to deal with Oregon. I have spoken time and time again publicly on my feelings about that issue, and as governor, I will lead the way at every opportunity to say that Oregon will be, can be, and should be diverse in every sense of the word. I support that, and I will work to make it happen.
Part of the anti-incumbency mood around the country is reflected in 3 or 4 states that have been voting on measures to limit the number of terms that people can serve in the state legislature. How do you feel about that for Oregon?
I'm not supportive of it, and let me tell you why. I have no problem with the fact that my term as Secretary of State is limited, or that the governors or other constitutional officers, because I think that makes sense. But in a sense, the voters always have a chance to limit a term. They do it at the election booth, and out of the legislature, they send people home to their communities at every election. What happens if you begin to limit terms in the legislature is you lose your historical memory about the issues that have come before. And I think it's important that we have that diversity of new members with new blossoming ideas, and members who can say, well, let me tell you, it might be doable, but let me tell you what happened when we tried that in 1979. So I think that diversity in the legislature and that knowledge base and experience is very, very important as we look to solutions for Oregon. So I am opposed to limiting terms of legislators, except as voters do it on Election Day.
In Baltimore County alone, over 17,000 people are served in the county's shelters. Statewide, over 25,000 people a year are homeless. What would you do to stem the growing tide of people becoming homeless in Baltimore County and throughout the state?
The program that I introduced for affordable housing is an important first step, because what we have now is about 400,000 Oregonians on any given day who could be thrown into homelessness because they're not insured, because they have a car accident, because they lose their job. But every day they are subject to that. So we first of all have to have affordable housing and affordable health insurance, the 2 things that are most likely to put people on the streets if we don't have them. And my program looks at programs like the Community Development Commissions that take in a basically lower income area and take the housing that is there, look for the vacant blocks of vacant housing, the boarded up housing, and convert it into rentals and home ownership for lower income citizens. That is an important first step to doing it. So I think it is a combination of taking away the things that cause people to be homeless, and when looking at creative ways to fund housing so that people can buy a home or rent a home who are lower income in the state. And my program does exactly that.
Arnold Kogan, member of the City Club. Barbara, after you are inaugurated as governor, could you tell us the first 3 things that you plan to do?
After the celebration, now let me tell you very clearly what they are. I will put together a very strong priority budget that deals with the issues I have discussed throughout this campaign. A strong, balanced, responsible budget. That will be first. Secondly, I will move immediately to working on the school finance proposal, getting it on the ballot early in the legislature with their vote, and then moving forward across Oregon to make sure that in fact it happens. And thirdly, I will be searching for the most talent and diversity, geographically and otherwise, in this state that I can find, to add to the talent that has come in the last 4 years, to bring to Oregon the ideas and the innovation and the hard work and the talent that we have in the state, to bring all of the ideas together and to make them happen. I think we have so much talent in this state that we have not used yet, who should be part of making it happen, and that will be a very high first priority for me.
Campaign costs are escalating greatly, as we all know. Do you have specific proposals to bring reform to campaign expenditures?
Actually, I supported a measure in the last session that we worked cooperatively, an interesting group of people, the Secretary of State's office, Senator Bunn from Yamhill County, who is a conservative Republican, and the ACLU. And we worked together to find a way to limit campaign spending that met Oregon's constitutional provisions for freedom of speech. That measure got through the state Senate after a lot of very hard work and a lot of compromise. It was a fine measure. It then went to the House of Representatives, where it died. I would like to try again on a measure that does the two things I want most: to stop this escalation of spending and to make sure it meets that constitutional standard. I have raised $1.3 million in this race, and I'm going to struggle to try to do it on 1.6. Compared to what I think you will see on Monday when Dave releases his report, between $3 and $4 million, I don't know how we continue to allow that escalation and expect that there is any fairness or any validity to what we are doing as we choose our office holders as Oregonians. So I will not give up till we find a responsible way to limit the spending that meets the constitutional standard of Oregon's free speech.
Pauline, I believe you have another question. Oregon is in the middle of a growth spurt. Maintaining and controlling that growth is critical to the livability of the state. How do you and your opponent differ on growth management issues?
Well, I can't tell you every place we differ because we've spoken, at least as far as I know, a limited amount on that subject matter. First of all, I'm a much stronger supporter of land use planning than Dave is. He talks about changing it, and pretty soon as you listen to the language, that change begins to be watering down. I believe that 17 years ago, when Oregonians put land use in place, and when they reinforced it 3 times at the ballot, they said they wanted it to happen. That means that now, 17 years later, when we need it most, this is what we designed it for, was this time of growth, and I will not let it be watered down and become less than it was intended to be for growth. I also believe that the issue of transportation is a vital piece of that, and I have been very adamant and strong about my support for light rail and other transportation needs. The other piece is that we have to deal with the housing complex issue. And the problem with that is many people who are working in Washington County can't afford to live in Washington County, so they're coming clear across into the east side of Multnomah County to live. And we have to find some way to bring our housing, our transportation, our jobs together in an area that means we sort of live in a little bit more compact way and don't spend all our time going from one place to another in a time of real growth. And I think we're going to have to work very hard in making that last piece happen.
There's talk of having Metro take over TriMet. TriMet is a state entity, and the directors are appointed by the governor. Metro is a state entity too, but the directors are elected by the people. What do you think of that idea and mixing the two?
Well, having observed in this metropolitan area for a very long time the whole issue of how we deal with our sort of regional needs, I feel strongly that it needs to work regionally, and it has begun to do that, and I think that's positive. I have no problem with bringing the two groups together, but if we bring them together, I think we have to be sure we don't lose any of the identity, both in terms of the elected process and in terms of the operation process that sometimes is lost when you unite groups of that kind. I think it may be important to finish a piece of the light rail construction and move forward with that, to see that that piece happens with total concentration by the agency. And then together, I think the management for the future of all of the needs of the metropolitan area can clearly be done by one very strong, well-designed agency.
Pauline, what is the last question? Oh, this ought to be an easy one for you, Barbara. Oregon's energy needs should increase during the 1990s. You've advocated the closure of Trojan. On what do you base your position, and with what would you replace the energy that Trojan now generates?
First of all, let me be very clear about something. Anybody who has described my position on Trojan as shooting from the hip doesn't know anything about my background. My position on Trojan was based purely on one thing: safety for Oregonians, for people who live in the state of Washington, for the Columbia River, and for our ground and land surrounding it. There is only one way to deal with this issue. Until there is a safe way to store nuclear waste in this country, and for 4 decades the federal government has failed to find that place, till that exists, I can't see anything sane about creating more nuclear waste with no place to store it. My experience on the Hanford Waste Board and what you are seeing out of the dishonesty of that Hanford operation tells us that as Oregonians, we can't rest assured that everything we hear is true. We can replace the 4% of the power grid that Trojan supplies in the Northwest with cogeneration, with real conservation, with solar, and with wind power just as a beginning. And I am willing to do a little extra and even pay the $2 or $3 a month extra to make sure that my river and my land and my state and the people are safe. It was not shooting from the hip. It was understanding intellectually, emotionally, politically what it means to continue to be quiet on an issue of this nature. There's something that's been on my mind in this campaign that I hadn't really had a chance to say until last night in the Pendleton debate. I'd like to share with you those thoughts here again in Portland. My goal in running this campaign has been to be honest and straightforward. I've tried to speak to you as citizens and voters directly and to let you know where I stand. But let's face it, there's a risk in doing that. When you tell voters where you stand, you risk that they may not agree with you all the time. And that's why many politicians avoid taking stands on tough issues. Because if they waffle just a little bit and talk out about how important the issue is and talk real tough, they can talk around the issue and avoid taking a stand. There may not be a single voter in all of Oregon who agrees with absolutely everything that a candidate says in a campaign. Probably not even one. And I'm not going to stand up here today and try to convince you that I support everything you support and that I oppose everything you oppose. Because we're bound to have differences. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you that I'm going to breeze into the governor's office and immediately solve every one of the tough and complex problems that face our state. Because nobody can do that. I know that when politicians try to tell you that you are smart enough to know not to believe them. Politicians do a disservice to voters when they try to pretend that they are all things to all people. When they try to woo voters with too much fluff and too little substance, with too much tough talk and not enough tough stands. All too often, campaigns lose touch with people. We spend too much money on 30-second television ads that really don't tell you anything as voters. We have too few debates that allow voters to compare the candidates. And then we use 60-second answers to discuss the most complex Oregon issues. And quite clearly, nobody can do justice to those issues in 1 minute. And what about misleading negative advertising? Does anybody really like those ads? It is no wonder that people are disgusted with politics and turned off by campaigns. But I believe in the fundamental wisdom of Oregonians. When it comes right down to Election Day, voters recognize empty rhetoric for exactly what it is. They know that a good quality television ad does not necessarily make for a good quality governor. And they know the difference. Looking for that difference is what brings citizens out to listen to a debate exactly like this one. And I thank you for taking the time to be here. Only if one of the major candidates was before you. I'd like to finish by telling you today that if you elect me governor, I will work hard. I will be fair. I will be accountable and accessible. I will take on the tough issues. I will lead. I will do a good job. And I will never, never take Oregonians for granted.